Okay, seriously, who turned out the lights? I need to make a phone call to DatGameCollector. Well, that wasn't quite the lights I was looking for, but let's give DGC a call.
What's going on, gamers and collectors? DGC back with another video. Wait, this isn't my channel. This is RockerGaming's channel. He's a good buddy of mine now, and he actually worked on something for me. He ordered these parts for me about 6 months ago, and I've been waiting to get this custom console. This has been in the works for a very long time. As soon as he told me that he got the parts for it, I abstained myself from playing the N64 for many months at this point, probably about 6 months until I got this bad boy, and that is this sweet Nintendo 64. This is Ultra HDMI modded as well as RGB modded, so that I can play it on my CRT or my HD TV, or even both at the same time, which is really sweet. So I'll be definitely putting out a lot more N64 content on my channel. However, you know, with Nintendo's sweet copyright strikes, it'll have to be limited to non-Nintendo games, but definitely look forward to some content on my channel, and let's go ahead and let RockerGaming explain exactly what's in this sweet N64. Take it away, buddy.
Thanks, DGC. And while I thought it was a fantastic idea for us not to play N64 when we ordered those parts, little did I know it would take about 6 months for us to get them all. So for that, I apologize. But this console's pretty far from what you just showed everybody, so let's figure out a way to get this to where it needs to be. So that board is a little bit dirty, so let's go ahead and clean it up. We're going to use some isopropyl on the board itself, we're going to use some contact cleaner on the cartridge slot, we're going to use a little bit of sandpaper on some of the shielding, and then we're going to go ahead and use a magic eraser on the ports. Okay, now that we're all cleaned up, let's do a quick test. I love it when things work. First try. Well, DGC said he wanted both RGB and HDMI. Let's go ahead and get the RGB installed first. For the RGB, we're going to use the Voultar kit, and this is a really nice kit because it buffers C-Sync for you properly on board, which is absolutely fantastic, as well as uses the 7374 chip, which allows for you to turn off low-pass filtering. When putting in the N64 conductors for RGB, it's important to keep the leads as short as possible. You're also going to see me go ahead and tack these in and then come back in and make the final solder joint. This makes it a lot easier because that holds it in place so you can make a really nice joint on the back end. With RGB out of the way, it's now time for HDMI via the UltraHDMI kit. You're going to see me make one mistake here, and if you end up doing this yourself, I want to point it out. I'm going to go ahead and use no clean flux here, and this is actually not recommended. It's actually recommended that you go ahead and use rosin flux, and so that's what I would recommend as per the instructions. I used no clean, and while I had no problems with it, I probably don't recommend it. Okay, with all the fine pitch soldering out of the way, it's time to get the power all soldered up and go ahead and also get the controller OSD soldered in. So I opted to go one step further on this thing, and while, you know, DGC didn't specifically request this, it's something I felt the need to do. So let's go ahead and pull out this jewel, and we're going to start doing some cutting of the case. Purists, consider this your fair warning. There's a Dremel coming out in the next scene. So to do this cutting, I'm using the etching or engraving bit from my Dremel kit, and then I'm also going to be using a sanding drum to go back and clean all this up. There's also a few stubborn bits of plastic over here that kind of run between the jewel and the expansion bay. So I'm going to use my flush cuts as well as an X-Acto knife to go ahead and carve all those out. Time to wire up some LEDs, and these aren't normal LEDs, they are RGB LEDs. And I'm going to go ahead and use RGB strips here because honestly it's super easy and it makes it easier for someone else to give it a try as well. So I used a little bit of isopropyl and this spudger, and I'm going to go ahead and get all this nasty glue that originally came on the N64 Jewel off. And we're going to go ahead and replace that with some very small double-sided tape later on in the back. So I'm using a little bit of hot glue to make sure those LEDs don't go anywhere. And off camera, I also installed the region-free card slot. Well, after some pretty serious elbow grease and some awesome mods, this thing turned out looking absolutely awesome. But as I said earlier, there were RGB LEDs put in here. So let's check out how those work, and let's check out the Bluetooth controller that I put in there. So yeah, the console looks great, but how does the video look? And how does the RGB actually compare to the HDMI? Now I know I've done some of these comparisons in the past, but I figured out something through the comment section below, which by the way I very much appreciate, and that's that I made some mistakes. So let's fix these mistakes this time through and do another video comparison. Alright, so first up's Composite. This is your single yellow cable. Nothing really to say much here other than it's pretty muddy and doesn't look great, and we can do much better. Next up is RGB, and this is RGB through the FrameMeister, and we are using the Firebrand X N64 RGB settings at a 4x horizontal scale. Firebrand X's FrameMeister profiles are often regarded as some of the best out there. And just to be overly transparent, here are the settings that are on the UltraHDMI. We have sharp pixels, video deblur at 1080p. So we'll flip back and forth between HDMI and RGB, and in the top right hand corner you should be always able to see what video mode we're looking at. Still pretty hard to see the difference between HDMI and RGB, right? Well, let me make things a little bit easier for you. I'm going to line up HDMI on the left side of the screen and RGB on the right side of the screen so you can see a nice cross comparison. It's very difficult to get these two things lined up absolutely perfect, so you're just going to have to bear with me. This was probably some of the best I could do. So what do you think? RGB or HDMI? Let me know in the comments. But to me, the HDMI is still definitely sharper. It definitely looks better. However, I would still stand by my original comments, which were that if you have multiple systems that could use RGB and take advantage of the FrameMeister, that is still the path I would go down, assuming that you can, use multiple consoles with it. And I would say probably at least 3 consoles to make it worth your while. Well, that'll do it for me. I really want to thank DatGameCollector for coming on, working with me on this project. It was a lot of fun. With that said, guys, I want to thank you very much for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon for the next one.